Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ask Kati Anything. I'm your host, licensed marriage and family therapist, Kati Morton. I'm so glad that you're here. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about negative self-talk, also the different ways that people-pleasing can show up in our lives, and how to connect what we rationally know with how we feel. Then I'm going to discuss whether or not it's okay to cuss in therapy, how to healthily lose weight when we also have an eating disorder, and whether or not a therapist can be biased due to their specialty. If you are looking to get your questions answered, or you want to be more active in our community, you can join me on Patreon at patreon.com/Kati Morton, or you can join YouTube memberships. I offer live streams on both platforms. They're just a little bit different. You can look at what I offer. But over on YouTube memberships, I offer journal prompts, then 30-minute live streams, and then 60-minute live streams each and every month. On Patreon, I have one live stream every month where I answer questions if you're in the $20 tier and above, but you can participate for just $1 a month. And then there are other benefits as you kind of go up there where we have hangouts through Skype with other people that are part of the community and one-on-one hangouts with me. So you can check those benefits out. And without further ado, let's jump into today's question or questions. Question number 1 says, "Hi, Kati. I hope you see this." I did. I just wanted to check in with you. I'm someone who shit talks myself a lot, and my therapist calls me out on it, as I should. I noticed in some of your videos you will refer to yourself as the crazy therapist or this weird therapist. And I want to check, is this you just poking fun at yourself, for example, when I refer to myself as the crazy lady in a fun way, not shit talking myself, rather than you talking bad about yourself? I only ask because you're an amazing therapist and we all appreciate you. So if you're shit talking yourself, I'm calling you out on it. I appreciated this question, or comment rather. And the truth is, I think it's probably, if I'm honest, a little bit of both. First off, being the fact that when I started my channel in 2011, no one else was doing this. And I was definitely like weird. Like when I'd go to events, people didn't know what to do with me. I'd talk to other creators and be like, "Hey, do you want to collab?" And they're like, "I don't really talk about mental health on my channel." I got a lot of pushback that way back in the day. And I think probably some of that is still hanging around, even though it's no longer true. You know, we have those old stories we tell ourselves. I think that might be one of mine. However, most of it is really, I'd say that's like 10, 20% of it. The other 80, 90% is just me poking fun, because whenever I give you guys some thoughts or advice or insight into something, I'm always like, how would you bring this up with your therapist? You know, I listened to this therapist on the internet. Like, how do we talk about that, right? And so that's me kind of just poking fun at the fact that I have a very cool and amazing job, but also kind of weird, right? It's a little different. It's not what I thought I'd be doing. I didn't think this was a job when I was in school, right? The internet and social media had not become really what it is now at that time. So it wasn't even an option or opportunity. And so I think that's kind of where that comes from. But thank you for calling me out on it. And it's good. I kind of like the thought or the practice of us, you know, checking in with each other, because we often shit talk ourselves, especially, and not realize it. It's almost like we do it like as a knee-jerk reaction, or it's almost, we're so used to it that it doesn't even seem that negative. Like I have a girlfriend who does this all the time, where she will just talk down to herself and she'll say things like, "Yeah, I'm doing this, but it's kind of like stupid." And like, she doesn't love her job. And so she shit talks her job a lot. And I'm like, "Hey, you've been at that job for a long time. You're doing a great job," right? I know that can sound kind of weird maybe, but that is all kind of part of the shit talking, because it's a huge part of like who she is to some extent and what she spends most of her time doing. And if she's talking down on it all the time, it can lead to her feeling bad. And so I always call her out and I'm like, "Hey, I know you don't like it. Let's find you something better," but it has nothing to do with who you are, or, you know, it's not indicative of your abilities. We have to make sure that we're not tying those things. So just be cognizant of how you talk to yourself about yourself specifically, but also the things that are part of your life and the big pieces of that. Let's make sure we're talking more kindly, because we can get used to shit talking ourselves and not even realize it. Even just this morning, I was talking to my neighbor Karen, and I am going to the United Nations at the end of this month to talk to, it's part of the Eating Disorder Action Day. And there's a mental health coalition is going to be there. It's going to be very, very cool. And I was telling her about it, and I just kind of said it and was like, yeah, I'm doing this thing. And she's like, "That's a big deal. You need to give yourself credit. Don't try to downplay it." And it's funny how we do that, right? We can often downplay things that are important to us or things that should be big deals, because for whatever reason, we either think we're not worthy of it or not worth it, or that it makes us conceited or something, like an asshole or vain if we do feel proud. And I don't know why not we necessarily, I guess I don't know why I do that. And it's something that I want to be more aware of. So let's all try to be more aware this week and report back on how that goes, okay? But thanks for checking in on me. Let's move on to question number 2. This question says, hey, Kati, can you explain people-pleasing? Gladly. And the different ways that it can show up. Is it always a pacifying coping mechanism? Nope, I'll talk about that. I find that I get dysregulated when my husband is upset, so I tend to do things to make him feel better so that I feel okay again. Any idea what that behavior could be and why? And there are some follow-ups. I think there's like 2 or 3 add-ons to this, but let's just jump right in. I saw this on Instagram, so I cannot take credit. I don't know who coined this term. No one has given anybody credit for it, but it's true and it's beautiful and it's also kind of painful. And that is, people-pleasing is abandonment of self. And I want to say that again. People-pleasing is abandonment of self. And the reason that we say it that way, and the reason I believe it is so incredibly true, is that when we put someone else's happiness, someone else's security, safety, whatever it is, above our own, we have to leave ourselves to languish or leave it for later, put ourselves second. We're abandoning ourselves to put someone else first. And that's what people-pleasing is. And so with this question, is it always a pacifying coping mechanism? It's not even about pacifying the other person. It's about pacifying us. Because another thing that I've learned through my own personal work with people-pleasing, and I'm writing a book about control and why do we keep doing the things we're doing, and a huge part of that is people-pleasing, is that when we don't grow up in a situation where all varied emotions are acceptable and talked about, which is almost all of us, right? Let's be honest. Then we can grow up into adults that aren't comfortable with any kind of emotional dysregulation in ourselves or in someone else. And so to this person's question where they say, I try to make him feel better so that then I feel better, that's because his dysregulation makes you uncomfortable. So people-pleasing is actually kind of a manipulation tactic, right? I'm trying to manipulate you into feeling better so that I don't feel as anxious about it or as upset about it. And so it's understanding that that's the role. So it's not so much that we want to please other people. Like there's that meme going around the internet where it's like, oh, you're a people pleaser, name 3 people pleased with you. And it makes me laugh every time. But it's true because it has nothing to do with actually pleasing them. It's more about us assuaging our own anxieties. And the last little comment I want to make on this is the fact that you said, I find I get dysregulated. That's you acknowledging your own anxiety. But I also want to throw in this potential piece here, which is what I'd call enmeshment, where what enmeshment means is we don't have healthy boundaries between us and another person. So their emotions become our emotions become their emotions. It's a very unhealthy dynamic. It's not actually a way that we want our relationships to go, but it's incredibly, incredibly common. And so you're like picking up on his vibes and making his vibes yours. And so with all that in mind, right? People-pleasing is abandonment of self. We do it not because we want them to feel happy, but because we're uncomfortable with their unhappiness. And also this codependency kind of piece. The way that people-pleasing can show up is anything that touches on those 3 things. Meaning, if we don't feel like we're worthy and we don't feel like we're important enough, it could be showing up there. In places where we feel anxious or uncomfortable with someone else's upset, it can show up there. It can also show up in places where we don't have any healthy boundaries. And these could be experiences like we can people please at work, meaning we can say yes when we mean to say no. We can people please in our relationships, meaning not only romantic, but friendships. We can put their desires above our own. Let's say we really want to see, this movie, and our friend at the last minute is like, you know what? I don't really want to see that. I'd rather see this. And we just kowtow. And every time, this is a pattern. It's not just a one-off. It's something that we always do. We always put other people first. We abandon ourselves, our own desires. I'll give you a little piece of homework to kind of maybe see how it feels for you. But something my therapist had me do that I've had a really hard time with is doing something by myself. No one else can be involved, just because I want to do it. just for the fun of it. That has been so incredibly hard for me because of all the things we're talking about, because I don't always put myself first. So the sheer act of doing something by myself is like, how dare you? And then the fact that I'm doing it only because I want to, it's not a need. Again, how dare you, right? All coming back to where my people pleasing comes from, which is this, not only do I have anxiety stuff, but it's mainly the fact that I feel like I have to earn love, support, attention, affection, etc. It has to be earned in some way. I'm not worthy of it just being. I have to hustle for that worth. And so people pleasing is a version of me hustling. And I wish I could give you all the different ways that it could show up for you, but hopefully just understanding people pleasing from a deeper level and kind of the ways it can root itself in our life, I hope you're able to see maybe the ways that it's showing up for you. And something that could be incredibly beneficial is for you to try to do the homework that I've been trying to do, doing things on your own, just for the heck of it, just because you want to. But whenever we have people pleasing issues, we also struggle with boundaries. And so because you're aware that you try to make your husband feel better, I would challenge you to not do that. It doesn't mean we can't be kind and loving and supportive, but we don't have to light ourselves on fire to keep him warm. We don't have to abandon ourselves to ensure he feels better. We can allow for him to be uncomfortable and us acknowledge how that feels for us and ride it out. I know it sounds terrible. I know it's uncomfortable. That's why it's a challenge. That's why it's not like, oh, you know what you could do easily? This is hard. And what we're really trying to do is break patterns. Maybe in childhood, if someone in your life was upset, maybe you were the eldest daughter or the oldest child in your family, you felt responsible for the emotional well-being of everybody in your family. Maybe there was some abuse happening. So if someone was upset, that meant that either they'd been abused or that abuse could happen. So we went into this fawn response, this extreme people pleasing. Maybe you're like me and your parent worked away from home a lot. And so you felt like you had to really hustle to get their attention, to be worthy of that. You thought that something you did kept them away from home for long periods of time. That's what I internalized. So there could be any number of things that cause this, but just be aware of how it shows up for you. And let's be curious, not judgmental about it. Now, there were comments on this as I have an add-on. As a longtime people pleaser and social chameleon, I find it near impossible to be my genuine self when in the presence of other people. It can be tricky. It's always about catering the conversation to the interests of others and avoiding conflict at all costs. I know it's a form of manipulation, but I don't know how to stop. It feels as though I'm waking up after a conversation. I'm left puzzled for a second, wondering what the fuck just happened. It's as if there's another person that takes the reins when I'm around others. I hate this person. Any insight into this issue would be appreciated. Thank you. I love this question too, because it can be hard to be our genuine selves because we worry so much about what other people are thinking. I think a lot of people pleasing can overlap with some anxiety symptoms, particularly social anxiety or social phobia symptoms, because of that fear of conflict and the fear that people won't like us and they'll think poorly of us, right? We want, again, it's the manipulation, right? We want other people to like us. And so for the person who asked this question, I would encourage you to notice, maybe look back on other social interactions where you felt like you kind of went away, right? You said you wake up and you're like, what the fuck just happened? I wonder if you're dissociating. I wonder if the level of anxiety for social situations has gotten so high that you're not able to stay present. And if that is the case, then we need to try to find some ways to ground ourselves. Meaning, if we start feeling that slip away, we're going to have to get to know those signs and symptoms. We might not know right now, and that's okay. We can look back on previous experiences and see if we can try to feel out what was going on in our brain and bodies before we pulled the ripcord on reality and we're like, wow. But if we can get to know that and we feel it happening, can we step away from the conversation? Can we go to the restroom? Can we change the subject? Can we have a fidget toy in our pocket? Can we, go into the restroom, stomp our feet, shake out? Can we look around the room for things that are blue, green, black, brown, and count them? Can we look around the room for something that starts with the letter A, B, C, D, and so on? What grounding techniques help you? Let's see if that is beneficial. Another thing is ways to lower the anxiety. So if we know that our dissociation, or even this just like feeling like you wake up after a conversation, if we feel like that's happening, are there things that we can do to lower our anxiety? This could be prep work that we do. It could mean that we do some body shakes. We do some breathing in the car before we go into an event. We take breaks throughout. It could mean we bring a person with us that's supportive. Maybe it means we go get into therapy, get on some medication. Could be any number of things. Try to bring that anxiety down. But once we kind of know where this is coming from, then we can do something about it. Because if we're dissociating, if we're kind of like waking up after conversations, then we're not going to be able to get into being our authentic self yet. We have to be able to sustain conversations and be present first. Then we can start to challenge our urge to turn conversations towards things that we know people want to talk about, or always act interested in things that we're really not interested in, then we can challenge that. But we're not going to be able to do that if we're already dysregulated, because challenging things is almost always dysregulating. So let's start there first, okay? Now there's one more add-on. It says, I find it incredibly difficult to focus and think clearly when I'm in the presence of other people. I need to know that I'm entirely alone or that everyone is asleep. I complete most of my work late at night at the cost of my sleep. I've experienced this since high school. As an added note, I often feel responsible for the emotional state of those around me. That is interesting. I don't know if this is an HSP, meaning highly sensitive person issue, ADHD, or being raised in an enmeshed family, or something else. What do you think could cause this, and what would you recommend for overcoming it? Thanks for the work that you do for the community, of course. Now, the fact that you feel responsible for the emotional state of others, I kind of addressed this at the first part of the question, that enmeshment. There's something in your upbringing, whether you were the oldest child, oldest daughters often experience this, like feeling that they're the emotional support for their family, but eldest sons can have it too. It's not necessarily gender specific. So it could be because of your role in your family, and they could have expected you to be like the one that keeps everybody happy, kind of like, you placate everybody, you're placater. But the fact that you feel like you're raised in an enmeshed family does lend itself to you feeling like other people's emotions are your responsibility because they're also yours, because there's no healthy boundaries. And so along with what I've mentioned, like finding ways to calm our system down and noticing how this shows up for you in your relationships, keeping all that in mind, I think another step that we could take would be working on boundaries. Now we're going to start on boundaries that are not so difficult, meaning not in relationships where we're really, really close to people. Because I have a feeling that if you feel responsible for the emotional state that's around you, it could happen to people you don't even know very well. And those are the places where we're going to set boundaries. Meaning, because boundaries are not requests, right? It's not about controlling someone else. It's about what we can do for ourselves. So let's say someone in our life that we kind of know at work is very distressed. And we feel the need to support them. We want to go over, we want to check in with them. We can even just maybe feel it. Like if we do have some HSP stuff, we might even just the emotional experience that's going on in our environment, we pick up on that. Now, instead of going over and seeking to support and seeking to understand, asking questions, talking to them, what if instead we checked in with ourselves? What if instead we distracted? Those are some other options that don't involve us getting emotionally connected to that person and maybe taking more responsibility. We're already feeling it. It's already pulling us in like a tractor beam. How do we fight back? And a lot of that's going to be distraction, and then checking in with ourselves. What's going on for us? What do we think this says about us? Why do we feel like it's our responsibility? Instead of engaging in it, let's get to know it better. Because once we understand it, then we can do something about it. And then the boundaries that will be in place are things like letting someone know, hey, I don't really have time to talk today. Or it could be as simple as like not apologizing when you're sharing space with another person, when you're not doing anything overtly in their way. Or saying no when we mean it, not picking up a call, not asking more questions when someone tries to dump on us what's going on. Those are all kind of examples of how we can start with these. It's not like less difficult boundaries, but they're less emotionally charged. The boundaries with people who are super, super close to us are going to be the hardest ones to place. So let's start with kind of more of the casual acquaintances in our environment stuff, like not apologizing, not picking up a call, things that are a little bit easier. And let's see how that goes. Okay. I hope that helps. Let's move on to question number 3. This question says, hey, Kati, how do I connect what I rationally know to what I feel? I know the whys behind my anxiety and know on a rational level I shouldn't be anxious about it. And I know how to argue back and how to decrease the anxiety in the short term. But nothing helps in the long term because no amount of thinking or fighting back against what my anxiety is telling me gets me to actually feel less anxious. No matter how much I know that I'm okay, it doesn't change anything. And I feel the anxiety just sitting there in my body at all times. I love this question. You guys have such great questions, but I love this question. I have a video that probably just came out, actually. By the time this comes out, it will have come out, about intellectualizing versus feeling, which is really like we can rationally know something, that's intellectualizing. Feeling, very different. And in short, in that video, I explain how to get to know our emotions and how to allow ourselves to feel them. So you can check that video out if you want that specific advice. But for this question, what's happening is the anxiety is still sitting in our body because we haven't moved it through. An important thing to remember when it comes to anxiety specifically, and a lot of mental illnesses, but a lot of anxiety, ADHD could be one, even my borderline patients, any of those, there's probably others, but those just off the top of my head, OCD. We can feel very queued up. We can feel very full of anxiety or whatever it is. And it's our nervous system's way of telling us that we're under threat. Now, when we have anxiety, our nervous system's like all haywire. It's saying we're under threat when we're not. Lots of things that shouldn't be terrifying, or they worry us intensely. We don't know what to do about it. And so our body, because it is worried and it feels under threat, it cues us up to take action, and we don't take any action because we're kind of frozen in fear or, panic or whatever. And it's in that freeze that we feel worse and that we get worse, and our world can actually get smaller. It's kind of like when it comes to PTSD, when we have that hypervigilance. And so, I get really hypervigilant, really overstimulated when I go to the park. So now I don't go outside anymore, right? It slowly shrinks our world. I don't like waiting in lines. I don't like people behind me. So I don't go to any stores I order in, or I don't go to my favorite amusement park because I just can't wait in line. I can't have people behind me. It freaks me out. So all of that to say that those symptoms make our world smaller. Now the way out of it, because we can understand, this is triggering my PTSD. This is triggering my social anxiety. I'm uncomfortable here. Instead of just understanding, that's important. That's a key piece. But then to move out of it means I need to find a way to get this energy out of my body, calm my nervous system down, and push myself to keep doing those things even though they're dysregulating. And it kind of goes in that order. I know that sounds kind of maybe backwards, but we have to find ways to calm our system down first. Because if we're going to challenge it, we don't want to dissociate. We don't want to cause a panic or anxiety attack. We don't want to cause a shutdown, right? We want to be able to engage with the thing that's overwhelming, that's anxiety provoking, scary. And then we want to be able to come back out of it. And so we need to have those tools or resources at the ready. These can be things like dunking our face in cold water, putting a cold rag around our neck. Like I said earlier, like if it's grounding stuff, could be like counting colors, doing the ABCs, could be, snapping a rubber band, fidget toys, all those things. Also, it could be a full body shake, anything like that kind of helps you regulate. One of my patients loved like stomping her feet, just stomp. That helped get it out. We're going to need to find ways to calm because you know that you're okay, but that doesn't change how you feel in your body because your nervous system's still queued up. So we need to trigger or initiate a nervous system release. Cold plunges, that's why people say they're so good for their mental health, for depression, anxiety. I believe a lot of it has to do with this. It's like a reset. I fell down a rabbit hole. So on TikTok, this woman was talking about research from NASA about rebounding. If you don't know what rebounding is, it's when you jump on a trampoline. Now, I had done a workout back in early COVID days when we first moved to this house called LEK Fit. And she does it on these little trampolines. And I really enjoyed it. I just, tried different things. I did it for like a year and then I was like, I don't need to subscribe to things. I'll, just switch it up. But there's so much research now and NASA in particular did much research about rebounding and the effects of jumping on trampolines when we work out just for like 10 minutes a day. And it has shown to be incredibly helpful when it comes to mental illness, not severe mental illnesses. And when they say severe, they usually mean things that need to be medicated. Like, let's say we're actively suicidal. We have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, or we have, some kind of psychosis I don't know, postpartum, things like that. We might need medication. That doesn't mean we're not going to need medication. But this rebounding has been proven and shown to lower cortisol levels and stress levels and help with anxiety and depression. So maybe we rebound. I think that might be why my patient likes stomping her feet. Something about the jumping and the bouncing is really, really helpful. It's also really like low impact on our joints. So better for our knees. But we have to get it out of your body. That's why somatic experiencing is such a beneficial therapeutic technique. And I might encourage you to look into that. See if maybe you could get some support through that, because what's happening is we understand it, but it's all caught up in our body and we need to trigger that release. So give yourself an opportunity to, push that out, shake it out, get it out of your body. And that should be able to help. But if not, also know that there is medication. When anxiety gets bad, when our mental illness affects us we can't do anything about it, there's nothing wrong with medication either. So I hope that gives you some ideas of things to try and do, and keep me posted. Okay? Let's move on to question number 4. This question says, "Hi, Kati, I hope you're okay. I was wondering if it's ever okay to swear in therapy. I was brought up to be polite and respectful, so I watch my mouth in most situations, of course. In most situations. Of course, this doesn't mean I don't swear. I just know the company that I can swear in versus the ones that I can't. In therapy, we were talking about a past trauma, and I've described the person before as someone that I hate, not a nice person, blah, 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 blah. I think my therapist noticed that I felt more strongly about this, and she asked me if you could describe him in a few words, what would it be? I admitted to her that I couldn't use the words I wanted to, as I didn't want to come across as rude, but she told me just to go for it and to finally be able to say, I would say, he's a fucking bastard. It felt so empowering. It can feel empowering. We'll talk about this. When this happened, she smiled, and it almost felt like we both saw it as a eureka moment. Even though I don't swear much anyway, I now feel more comfortable swearing occasionally when it feels it's the best to describe or express something, and I notice that my therapist will occasionally swear too. This helps me feel a bit more comfortable and connected with her. But is this frowned upon? Would a therapist tailor their attitude depending on the client or therapist? Can a client or therapist get into trouble for this? Or is it better just to use the words that best fit, or that fit best? I love this. Now, a couple of things. As a therapist, I will cuss or not cuss, kind of depending on my patient. Because if they're deeply religious or super, buttoned up and polite and kind of uncomfortable with conversations like that, I don't want to make them uncomfortable. The whole goal as a therapist is to kind of be like a blank slate as much as possible. Obviously, I'm going to look the way that I look, and there's assumptions that can be made. I'm female, I speak English, I'm blonde, I'm older, there's all these things and assumptions people can make about a therapist, but as much as we can control, we try to not offer up anything extra, okay? And that's so that you feel you can be yourself. Now, you guys know me. I curse like a sailor. I find cursing to be incredibly helpful. I think it's, for me, in the same way the person described this, I remember, because for those of you who don't know, I grew up incredibly religious, very active in church. And part of the reason why I went to Pepperdine, my mom was like, good to send you to a good Christian school. Also grew up in purity culture, and church just kind of felt incredibly suffocating for me. I remember in college, around my junior year, so it's probably like 2021, my good friend Kim, she curses a lot. And she doesn't as much anymore because she has little kids, but she used to a lot. And it gave me this, it was almost like a eureka moment, like the way this person's describing it, because I could actually express myself. It felt more thoroughly or more accurately. It almost felt like by using like the nice words, it didn't always fit how I felt or what I was going through or the way that I experienced that, right? And so it just felt more honest. And that was incredibly life-changing for me. And I know that sounds silly to be like cussing is life-changing, but it was. And I've never gone back. I mean, you guys probably only know me as someone who curses, and we have Kim to thank for that. Thank you, Kim. But I find swearing to be helpful, and probably also a part of it, just for total context, I think is because of my religious past. And I think that kind of rebellion that I've taken from that, it also feels good to me because I felt so oppressed by that, if that makes sense, and controlled. So in therapy, you can curse as much as you want. Swearing is completely fine. It's not frowned upon. The goal of therapy is for you to feel connected to your therapist and for you to feel like it's helpful. And as long as it sounds like all those things are aligned, then as long as it's not unethical or illegal activity, it's fine. And this is perfectly healthy and fine. I cussed in practice in sessions with a ton of my patients over the years, and some not, just depending on their comfortability. And the fact that your therapist occasionally swears too probably tells me that they do in their regular life. But again, they're in therapist mode, so they don't want to put anything onto you. They want to make sure that you're comfortable. And the fact that you're like, he's a fucking bastard. She was like, get it. Yeah. Say it. Do it. Because it feels good. There is something like cathartic about that. And I encourage you to just lean into it. Let yourself express how you need to express, however it feels the most accurate and honest to you. Okay? Moving on to question number 5. It says, Kati, I need to lose weight. It's not just my opinion. I do have excess weight. My health would benefit from losing weight. I'm pre-diabetic. My heart is not doing its best. Also, the more I weigh, the more my joints hurt. However, I have had every eating disorder under the sun, including anorexia. And in the past, I've managed to have a relapse while having a dietitian and a therapist. That's not uncommon. And it turned into anorexia for a year, binge purge for another year, and now binging for the last half a year. Every diet I've had turns into 2 to 3 years of suffering. I've had those 5 cycles, and I'd like to lose the weight once and for all. But how do I do it? My body image is tied to feeling safe in this world due to a lot of trauma, including sexual. But I've talked about it a lot for like 7 years. However, it doesn't feel like I've healed from it. We probably need a different type of therapy. I actually feel quite re-traumatized by all the talking. So I truly don't want to get back into therapy for this. So many thoughts. First of all, we're going to need a different type of therapy. Maybe that means EMDR. Maybe we need somatic experiencing. Maybe we need parts work or internal family systems or schema. Let's look into those, because just talk therapy, FYI, only works for about 40% of people. That means like 60% of us are like, what the fuck? I still feel bad. Why? Been talking about this all the time. Also, I think it probably has to do with the fact that a lot of us intellectualize, myself included. So I can understand and I can talk about it, but is that going to actually change how I act and how I feel about it? Absolutely not. So talk therapy only works for a percentage of people. And most likely you're one of those people it doesn't work for, which is why you still feel bad and you still have an eating disorder. Okay? To your question about losing weight. I hate to tell you, but you cannot diet. What we can do is we can start to try to not only heal from the trauma, but also heal our relationship with food, because you do not have a good relationship with food. That's why you've toggled between, you kind of chameleon from anorexia to binge purge to just binging. It's very, very common. I have tons of patients who've done this kind of, it's kind of like a cycle almost, but you swing back and forth between the different eating disorders because your eating disorder still serves a purpose. It soothes. You said it still helps me feel safe in this world. So as long as we still feel unsafe, you're just going to yo-yo or swing back and forth between all of these different types of eating disorder behaviors. So my encouragement for you is 2-pronged. Number 1, I want you to try a different type of therapy. I know you say I don't want to get back into therapy. We're not talking talk. I don't want you talking. I don't want talk therapy. Let's try somatic experiencing or EMDR. Let's start there. Second, I want you to pick up the book, Eating in the Light of the Moon. I love that book. I couldn't love a book more. It's in my Amazon shop, amazon.com/shop/Kati Morton. You'll see it in there. It's a blue cover. You can look it up, pick it up. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. I think it's good for all of us, by the way. And I really want to work towards intuitive eating. Like I said, you cannot diet. None of us with any eating disorder in our past can diet. We shouldn't diet. I think diets are bullshit in general, BT dubs. Because diet, even just the word, we have a emotional response to I'm on a diet. Means I don't get to eat what I want. It means I'm restricting. It means I don't eat this, that, or the other, right? It's a very icky word. I don't like it. Negative connotations, but it's also it's a restriction. What I'd rather hear is I'm eating when I'm hungry and I'm stopping when I'm full. And I'm getting to recognize that in my body. Even if it's uncomfortable. When I eat until I'm actually full, I feel the urge to purge. Okay, that's helpful information. Let's go with that. Let's think about it. Let's talk about it. What comes up for you? Do you feel unsafe? Can we help regulate our nervous system? That's really the work. I know you said you've been in therapy for like 7 years, so you don't want to get back in, but I just encourage you, let's not do talk therapy. Let's try a different modality, because my overall goal for you would be for you to get into what is called intuitive eating. Now, there's a beautiful workbook also in my Amazon shop called the Intuitive Eating Workbook. You don't need the newest edition. I know they have like 5 or 6 editions. Not necessary. Pick up the cheapest. But it's a great resource to work on with your therapist, with your dietitian, eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full, instead of doing this yo-yo, because dieting is just such a toxic concept. I do not believe in it. I believe that we can try to incorporate more fruits and veggies, and we can make sure we're eating enough protein. There are ways to focus on getting our body the nutrition that it needs without being on a diet, quote unquote diet. That's not something I'm ever going to support, because it ends up leading us to swing into these other things. Then we go from, I lost all that weight, to, I gained it all back, to, I'm restricting, I'm binging, I'm purging, that's the problem I have with dieting. It's not sustainable long-term. And so I want you to have a better program or a better plan that's sustainable. Okay? I know that's a lot that I just threw your way. So take your time with it. But just trust me that it can and will get better. Okay? Final question number 6 says, "Hello, Kati. Can a mental health professional be biased by their specialization when making a diagnosis?" Good question. "I was diagnosed with BPD, but when I got a new therapist, she said that BPD was a misdiagnosis, and I got diagnosed with ASD, or autism spectrum disorder. And BPD stands for borderline personality disorder. The first therapist was more familiar with BPD, and the latter was specialized in ASD, and I'm wondering if they could have been biased due to their expertise. Is it difficult to tell apart BPD and ASD? FYI, I am female and also have PTSD, which were confirmed by both therapists." Lots of thoughts. Now, a mental health professional isn't going to be biased by their specialization, but we are going to be on the lookout for it more than others. So the thing that's funny about these is that BPD and ASD are both very tricky diagnoses, and they're things that often get misdiagnosed. Like, I've had a ton of BPD patients be misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder. I've had, people with PTSD get diagnosed with BPD and ASD. The thing that these all have in common, BPD, ASD, is dysregulation of our nervous system, but for different reasons. And so I guess my encouragement for you is to always question a diagnosis, see if it fits, read about it, see if it feels real for you, if it feels true. Now, I have to be honest, when it comes to autism spectrum disorder, I do not specialize in it. And it is one of those things that I feel needs to be specialized in. Just like I feel about eating disorders and self-injury work, it needs to be specialized. And so the fact that you're seeing someone who does specialize in it leads me to believe that they have proper assessments and should be able to talk you through why they think it's that. I wonder if your other therapist that diagnosed you with BPD was assuming that your dysregulation had to do with fear of abandonment. But again, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to push back. It's okay to say, are you sure it's not this? Are you sure it's this? And you also to ask yourself that question. Does that feel right? Because while all mental health professionals, we have expertise in this area, we have specializations in certain things, you're the expert in you. And we only get to see you for like an hour or 2 hours every week. So if you do not feel that this is correct, please speak up. It's okay. It's not rude. It's not you overstepping. It's actually you advocating for yourself to ensure you get properly treated, properly diagnosed and treated. Okay? But I have a feeling that the reason is that overlap. And I don't think it's difficult to tell them apart, because BPD always comes down to like some kind of abandonment fear, attachment wound. BPD and complex PTSD have way more overlap in my brain than it does with ASD. But if someone's not really that aware of either, like your person who knows BPD doesn't know anything about ASD, then I could see that they wouldn't think to diagnose it, and vice versa. And so ask them questions, speak up. Let them know you're not really sure about this and you want to know why they think it's this. Ask if they didn't have you take an assessment, meaning like answering questions, like taking a quote unquote test. If they didn't do that, then, ask them more about how they diagnosed, what symptoms they think you have. Why did they think it was this versus that? It's okay to ask that, because therapists all the time are doing what's called differential diagnosis, where we're looking at 2, 3, 4, maybe 6 different potential diagnoses, and we're trying to weed them out. And so if I thought you had BPD, that means I probably weeded out bipolar disorder, maybe even complex PTSD, maybe ASD, maybe ADHD. Who knows what I thought when you first came in, but I've weeded them out for a reason, and I've come to that conclusion for a reason, and I should be able to communicate that with you. I honestly feel like a lot of therapists and mental health professionals don't communicate enough about the diagnosing process and also how they came to a certain diagnosis. So know that it is well within your rights, and you should ask about how they came to that conclusion, what symptoms they think you are expressing or experiencing the most, and you can question it. You can say, I don't agree, or are you sure? I don't think I have this, or this. It's okay to have that conversation. I've had tons of patients do it over the years. I had a patient for years who didn't believe that he had bipolar disorder until he went into full-blown mania once. And he was like, oh, I guess you're right. And that's okay. I didn't take offense. It has nothing to do with me. It's more about me ensuring he's getting proper care. And so push back a little bit, ask some questions, and hopefully they'll answer. But I don't think we'd be biased. We're just more apt to catch the symptoms when they present themselves. Okay? Thank you all so much for listening and for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. Like I said, you can join the community more actively on Patreon or YouTube memberships. And if you're looking to kickstart your mental health journey, I have a ton of workshops available for purchase at my website, katiemorton.com. Take care of yourselves, do your homework, and I'll see you next time.